All right, Mark, we can probably maybe give people another minute or so, just let a few late stragglers come in, and then we'll get started, everyone.
Yeah, and as Chris mentioned, we are recording this, so if you or someone on your team was unable to attend, we'll make this available for distribution so you can share. Just for the sake of time, and we'll have people joining as we get going. I'm Mark Slavens, so I'll be kicking off the meeting and covering some of the upfront information, but luckily for you all, Dr. Hendrickson will be covering the majority of the information on here, and Chris does a great job. He's obviously incredibly knowledgeable about our products and some of the needs that you all are working on with your customers and farmers. So it hopefully will be a really good and informative webinar. We have a restricted time, but if we want to stay on a little bit longer, I think we can make ourselves available and go further if the information's really good. So I'll kick off really quick. I'm new to NanoYield, so I joined the company about 4 years ago. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. I've been in the industry most recently for the last 11 years with Scott's Miracle-Gro, running the R&D group for their consumer business, and came over just a little bit ago. And I'll let Chris Hendrickson introduce himself as well for those who don't know him.
Hi, everyone. So, Chris Hendrickson here. I've been with NanoYield almost since its inception in some capacity. Right now, I am the Chief Science Officer, helping to sort of communicate some of the advantages of the technology as we grow. And thank you.
Very good. Well, please jump in today if you have any questions, and we'll be willing. We have a lot of smart people on the call, and we can hopefully answer anything that you need to have addressed. But we'll dive in and start talking about nitrogen in general. That'll be the focus of today's webinar, and then we have multiple webinars upcoming that will focus on some of our additional products. I believe next Friday is focused on Nano-K, and then a few others to come in the next few weeks. So just real quick to set the stage. So nitrogen obviously is a really important nutrient for agriculture and crop production. And over the last several decades, we continue to see the global use of nitrogen increase. And so it's going to continue to be a very important agronomic nutrient for crop production. And as you see on the small graph on the right, not all countries utilize nitrogen the same. So the US in particular, on average, uses about 73 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, which is the equivalent of anywhere from about 65 to 68 units or pounds per acre on a typical farm. And that rate's going to obviously vary based off of what the actual grower is growing, the length of the growing season, the amount of precipitation received. And so that's just a general average across a lot of different industries. But you'll see that some of the developing nations obviously utilize much higher rates of nitrogen for crop production than we do in the US, as we've got a lot of efficiencies built in, both with our crops that we produce through breeding, and then also through our agronomic principles that we've instilled over the last several years. But one thing that's becoming more and more important to us as both distributors but also growers is there's been some new pressures placed on the global supply chain for nitrogen over the last 24 months. And where that becomes really important is, one, just pure availability and making sure we have enough for our crop needs. But then secondly, managing our input costs, as input costs have grown pretty steep over the last 2 years, and especially in the last 6 months. So we're starting to see more and more pressure on commodity costs going to the farmers. And so that's going to really impact their bottom line of production. And so we need to make sure we're working on ways that we can cut those costs and still allow growers to be successful. And the reason that becomes really important, obviously, is nitrogen is the most critical nutrient that we can add to the crop at any given time. So it makes up about 2 to 5% of the above ground dry mass of most crops, depending on growth stage. It's incredibly important for amino acid and enzyme production, and ultimately the production of proteins, both within the plant, but also within the grain or fruit of the plant. It's important in chlorophyll production, DNA or nucleic acid production. So the number of things that nitrogen is critical for from a plant perspective is just overwhelming. And so making sure that it doesn't become a limiting nutrient for us in production is really important to us as growers. Now, oops, sorry. We can apply nitrogen in several different ways, but the general nitrogen cycle, it starts to demonstrate the ways that nitrogen forms, regardless of how we apply it, can transform and either become plant available or plant unavailable, or how we can lose different forms of nitrogen to the environment. But generally, we apply nitrogen in a form of like a urea. It goes through a breakdown or a hydrolysis process and is converted essentially to ammonium and ammonia, and then eventually can be converted to nitrate. And why that becomes important is urea by itself is essentially worthless to the plant because the plant can't use it. It has to be converted to either ammonium or to nitrate to be taken up by the plant. But in that process of conversion, there's ways that we can actually lose the nitrogen form to the environment, which becomes important both from economic loss perspective, but also an environmental loss perspective, because we can have impacts on the actual environment that we're growing in as well. But there are ways that we'll talk through that we can actually ensure that nitrogen stays more available longer term, what we can be doing to mitigate some of the risk of loss, and make sure that we're maximizing crop yield through the use of various different types of nitrogen sources. The first thing, though, that we want to start talking through are some of the nitrogen losses and why those are a concern. And we'll start off just real quickly on nitrogen leaching. This is more of a concern for certain parts of the country more than others. But essentially, when we start to convert more to the nitrate form in particular, it's a negative ion, an anion, so it doesn't bind very tightly to the soil. And that's why it can be lost more prevalently through leaching potential. And there are other factors that can impact that as well. So sandier soils or areas that receive higher amounts of moisture, et cetera, can really drive that potential. And so what you see here is just a model of the potential loss of nitrate through leaching. And in certain areas, especially the southeast of the US, that potential is high, and that becomes concerning, obviously, if we see nitrate getting into drinking water or aquifers. And then also the other area that gets to be important is if, obviously, those aquifers then feed surface salt waters through subsurface flow, and then you start to see algal blooms and things like that, which they've experienced a lot in Florida over the last kind of 10 to 15 years, pretty significantly. But ultimately, it's twofold. It's anytime we lose something to the environment, there's concerns over the environment, but it's also an economic impact that we don't want to lose something that we're putting in. We want to make sure that everything we're putting into the ground makes it into the crop to optimize potential crop yield. Secondly, outside of leaching, the other loss we get concerned with is volatile losses or gaseous losses of these nutrients as well. And so similarly, you have urea, which combines with water, carbon, oxygen, and begins to convert to essentially your ammonium forms and then to ammonia. And there's several factors we'll walk through real quickly that can impact this as well. But ammonia off-gassing is something that's really, concerning and can be quite prevalent with fertilizer applications if it's not managed appropriately, and can lead to pretty significant losses of inputs. We see a lot of work done over time, and it's not specific to just one type of nitrogen form, where we can see volatile losses or the gaseous forms, whether through ammonia off-gassing or NOx off-gassing, exceeding over 10% of the total N applied to the field. And when you're looking at the rising prices of nitrogen inputs today, that can be quite significant. And so we want to make sure that we're managing that appropriately. And just real quick to hit on, there's a few things that really can drive this for a grower and make this more problematic. Generally, higher soil pH can drive volatile losses more aggressively. The external temperatures, so the hotter the hotter the daytime temperatures are, that can drive volatile losses. And then of course precipitation. So generally, if you are able to get rainfall or precipitation of about 1/4 of an inch after application of your fertilizers, or you're able to irrigate, you can mitigate those losses. If you can't, you need to ensure that your fertilizer is incorporated into the soil so it's not exposed to the environmental conditions that can be problematic. So, those are some of the major things that I wanted to just at least talk or kick off related to nitrogen that we think about as we start to develop solutions or products that can really help the grower or the farmer be successful in maximizing yield with the products that they're applying, and specifically nitrogen. I'm going to turn the time over now to Chris, where we can start to talk about the development of NanoN in particular, and how that's a really nice solution that's going to help the farmer with kind of these issues that we just talked about. And before we turn over to Chris, if there's any questions, I'm happy to cover those, or we can wait till the end. So Chris, looks like we're handing over to you.
Sounds good. Okay, so NanoN Plus is our sort of solution to some of these trends that have been in place really in the ag and hort markets for quite some time. You know, there's been a big push recently for domestic and international food producers to maintain or grow current food production quotas by consuming equal or ideally reduced amount of inputs in that process. It's sort of a philosophical movement in its inception right now, especially in a lot of more heavily regulated agricultural markets. But I think it's safe to say that these types of efficiency pressures are going to be moving throughout the ag industry. So with that in mind, you know, nitrogen uptake efficiency is probably one of the largest targets that are out there for the, you know, the ag market, next gen fertilizers and things like that. So NanoN Plus is evaluated at a 100, with that one coming from a little bit of urea content. And basically this is a nanoliquid technology that's really ideally suited to stabilize and interact with these lightweight nitrogen sources, ammonia and nitrate being the two dominant ones in solution. And once those are bound and sort of stabilized to the nanoliquid technology suspended in solution, you now have a combined system that can be shuttled into the plant tissue much more effectively than just simple diffusion alone, which is how nitrogen is typically taken up by the plant tissue. So let's go down to the next slide. So as the picture suggests, NanoN Plus is a liquid product. You can purchase it in volumes anywhere from a quart to a gallon to 2.5 gallons and totes and upward. In terms of its compatibility and use, you know, one of the main advantages of NanoN Plus, just like really all of our liquid input products, is just its low use rate, but also just straight up convenience. The convenience of a liquid, you know, nitrogen fertilizer uptake aid, in this case with NanoN Plus, really just allows you to generate, complex mixes. You can work with UAN additions into your tank mix as you see fit, and add that NanoN plus into your mix at a rate of about 2 to 6 ounces to the acre. We do recommend to start with 4, but obviously given soil types, crops, forecast precipitation, you might want to make some local adjustments to that rate as well. So yeah, we just basically start with a little bit of water in the tank. Any conditioning or pH adjustment that needs to get done is probably going to be best done at this point. And then you add your UAN, and then finally NanoN plus in this case, to stabilize and sort of load the particles with as much nitrogen as possible. And then that gets sort of carried into the plant cell. Let's go to the next slide. So here is our label. A little bit of redundancy here, but it's a relatively lightweight product to work with. We have a 21.3 pound weight to the 2.5 gallon jug. Oh, there's Joe. Hi, Joe. And again, that urea content is what makes up the 1 in the 100 on the label as it stands. If you're in California, or if you've encountered some of our product literature, you may see NanoN there. We just do that for some local regulatory and legal reasons there, but essentially they are the same product. The NanoN plus is sort of the more universal product title that we use for the rest of the country. Let's go to the next slide. So yeah, very, very easy to work with. From a simple overview, we're providing 1% nitrogen. We recommend a starting sort of standard application rate of 4 ounces to the acre. Visually, it comes across as a opaque dark brown liquid with a pretty much straight neutral pH at 7, sometimes a little bit just under that at 6.9. And the liquid weight again is 8.51 pounds to the gallon. It's a very stable product. With that said, we do recommend not storing in direct sunlight, just like any nitrogen containing or really any fertility crop input whatsoever. We do want to keep it from freezing. The process of those ice crystals forming might have some negligent interaction with or negligible interaction with our suspended nanoliquid technology in the bottle. It is non-flammable. We're dealing with a 100 labeled product here, and the rest of that weight is water. So definitely not flammable there. And it's highly, highly miscible in water. Very, very convenient to work with in complex mixes. Well, let's go to the next slide. So one thing I always like to mention to people in discussion of NanoN or some of our other products are that we are a company that it adopts the philosophy that one size doesn't fit all, right? We know that nanoliquid technology is able to take and stabilize active ingredients, punch them into plant tissues much more effectively, but we don't think that every possible fertility or crop protection chemistry is going to interact with one type of nanoparticle identically. So what do? We develop and leverage different nanoparticles into nanoliquid technologies, and then pair them with a cargo or AI that technology is best suited to carry and interact with. And that's definitely the case here with NanoN. We're using a different nanoliquid technology here that Landon and myself and some others in the team have developed over time. And it seems to really deliver just absolutely fantastic performance in getting tissue levels of nitrogen up. So yeah, often imitated, never duplicated. We're not a one-size-fits-all company. Next slide. So with that in mind, NanoN plus, just a quick little review of some introductory material if there's anyone new to our tech and our product line here. For 2022, we have 3 organic OMRI certified products, 3 crop protection products, and the rest are 11 crop nutrition input products. So we're going to be talking about NanoN Plus today, but just bear in mind this leverages one of a growing profile of products that each, again, take that cargo or AI that they're meant to stabilize and interact and get into the plant tissue, and then pair that with a nanoliquid technology that's best suited for them. And next slide. Again, so just some very basic review here. What is a nanoliquid technology? You can really consider it as an advanced delivery system. What our technology does at its core is take whatever you want to get into a plant tissue through either foliar or soil application and get it into the tissue more effectively. So at a cartoon level, you can sort of see here what our nanoparticles look like, both up here and then replicated in a little more detail down here. But again, we have a non-uniform porous surface to the particle, and that porous surface allows for loading of active ingredients both inside and on the periphery, on the surface of these particles. And because of their size, we're talking about the nanometer scale here, or 1/1000th of 1,000th of a millimeter, so very small. Each one of these particles has enough surface area to bind 1 to 10,000 fertility ions, calcium, iron, things like that. Or for larger molecules like fungicides or insecticides, we might be able to pack, 1,000 of those onto the surface area of a single loaded particle. And notice also here that we have some flexibility in the amount of porosity and the size of these pores that are available to us on our nanoparticles. And basically, you can think of that as like a colander when you're, or a sieve when you're preparing a salad. The size and number of these holes determine how fast the water flows through the colander, right? So that's also going to translate to how fast any suspended or bound cargo or AI inside here is able to then disperse back out into solution and be available to the plants. Next slide. So this is an actual electron microscopy image of what I collectively call the package, right? The nanoparticle, when bound to active ingredients, whether fertility molecules or crop protection molecules together, that sort of forms the active functional unit of what our technology is and what it does. Once those two things are bound together, then we get a complex that enters the plant tissue and unloads that, that active ingredient. Two things to note here on the left, you can really get a great idea of just how sort of uneven, and the technical word is tortuous, of a surface that the particle has. And you can think of it sort of as the nooks and crannies of an English muffin. All those little nooks and crannies allow for way more surface area upon which chemistry can bind. And this is really where you get just some incredible performance gains in delivering all of that bound chemistry into a plant cell. On the right, notice that the center here of this picture is slightly out of focus. You see a little bit of light passing through here. And that just shows you that indeed there is a porous or technically mesoporous nature to the surface of the particle. Next slide. So here, some prior R&D has also just given us a great illustration of what these particles actually look like in, granted, hypothetical sort of clean environment, in very, very pure water upon which only calcium and magnesium ions have been loaded. You can see through artificial coloring, loading of those ions onto the surface, in this case, and the interior void space of the particles indicated in blue. So unique topology of these particles allows for unique binding characteristics of what we want, when we want. Next slide. So as a pure liquid platform, obviously the product profile allows for really flexible applications. I just want to make sure in the interest of time we move on to some of the slides pursuant to NanoN here. So let's just go ahead and skip through this. So, if you're applying your products for tank farms, in a greenhouse, fertigation, drip lines, our products can go through them. And that applies to nutrients, pesticides, PGRs, biostims, et cetera, et cetera. Let's plow forward. In terms of how the particles, once loaded, actually get into the plant tissue, there's three main pathways. You can see here that there is a foliar pathway that if it's sprayed to the adaxial or top side of a leaf, it's going to find sort of little cracks and fissures in the cuticular layer of the top side of that leaf. And then again, sort of worm its way down through those cracks and eventually find its way here into the top or palisade mesophyll of a leaf. Alternatively, loaded nanoparticles can find themselves onto the bottom or abaxial side of a leaf. There's all sorts of research showing that leaf stomates are able to absorb and take up these particles directly through their pores. And then there's been some notice and observation of limited translocation and mobility of those particles throughout the tissue once they enter through the stomates. And then finally, there is indeed a root absorbed or root system derived pathway upon which the particles can be absorbed. That has a lot to do with interaction with root hairs. But once inside, we see movement of the particles through either an apoplastic or through the cells themselves, or symplastic pathway in which the particles can move through the little spaces between plant cells. I think that's our sort of plant biology primer there. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, we can skip this too. Okay, so finally we get back to NanoN. With all of that scientific foundation in place, sort of the market dynamics in place, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've been able to elicit so far in some controlled greenhouse trials and grower trials that have taken a look at this product. Go to the next slide. In 2019, and so it's sort of the initial development of the NanoN Plus product, we knew we were on to something when we started pitting our own, prior iterations of our technology and other nanoparticles up against this improved nanoparticle in delivering nitrogen to some citrus trees out in Southeast Florida, and also some onion roots in greenhouse production under some controlled conditions. And sure enough, if you take a look at the standard fertility application, I believe this was through repeated foliar sprays, compared to our NanoRise addition, and then also addition of NanoN Plus to a potassium nitrate solution, in this case at 2 pounds. We could see that, roughly 4 times the leaf level nitrogen was actually getting into the canopy of these trees after a single foliar application with NanoN, when combined, rather than when combined with NanoRise or at the unchecked rate. So, some pretty impressive N uptake information there. And again, when we start taking a look at more controlled conditions, like root application in the greenhouse, we saw some similar data with NanoN Plus, just really delivering, again, fantastic results in outperforming existing traditional ways of getting nitrogen into your tissues. Let's go to the next slide. We got some great data from a field trial with field-dressed NanoN Plus at, I believe, the V2 stage of some field or dent corn in Milton, Indiana. And I wanted to know what was so fancy about Milton, Indiana. Why there? And apparently they're famous for doing these gigantic 14 square mile corn mazes every year. This was the one in 2021. Pokemon, gotta catch them all. I just thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, so in the NanoN Plus infield grower trial that we did here, took a look at 40 gallons of a UAN28 application through 10 replicates of, again, this B2 side dress application. That grower standard produced your, good old 200 bushels per acre. When we added 4 ounces of NanoN plus to that exact same rate, again, same application rate and timing, we saw a nice replicated boost of about 3 1/4 bushels to the acre. And so we were able to calculate about a 3.2 ROI on that addition. Let's keep going. Another silage or dent corn trial that we were able to conduct in 2019 with a relatively close by CRO. We saw through a reduced rate test where 15 gallons of a UAN28 solution was applied. Again, this was at a V2 side dress with a control here being no UAN whatsoever. These guys are doing pretty well with a 212 bushel per acre return at the check. So it was interesting to see what they were able to elicit with both reduced rate at 11.25 gallons or full rate at 15 gallons of UAN28 with and without addition of our NanoN plus at 4 ounces to the acre. First thing that jumps out here is you can really see some pretty close numbers with the full rate of UAN28 combined or compared to that of UAN28 with NanoN at a reduced rate. And this is, pretty strong reduction of about 30%. It looks like Jim has a question. Jim, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, that data is from a 2020 field corn trial in Wisconsin.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's fine. We've shared that before, and I just didn't want people to get confused because they've probably seen those numbers before.
No, thanks for clarifying. It's an exciting data set. So when we're able to show this, what we're able to elicit with such a strong reduction on the inputs, it definitely gets you interested here. So taking that further, we were able to conduct some agronomic return on investment analysis there, and we basically concluded that we were able to add $12 to the return of every acre when that UAN28 was supplemented with 4 ounces to the acre of NanoN plus. Next slide. Another interesting study I wanted to bring your attention to was a great study we did with some partners over in the Fresno area of California last year with a long-term pistachio grower that they've been working with down in Kern County. For those unfamiliar, Kern County has some really calcareous, sodic soils, high salinity content, and percolation rates through this soil can be pretty challenging. So this is a historic, fully drip line fertigated production orchard down in that area that the grower was very kind enough to be able to grant us 4 replicated 20-acre blocks. So basically we had 2 split 40-acre production blocks, and we took 3 of those 4 and gave them a reduced rate UAN application through 4 injections. All of their fertigation system was through an injection. And we kept 1 of those 4 blocks as the control. It got no additional NanoN plus, but did get the full rate of the UAN. So 80% UAN with NanoN plus against 100% UAN with nothing. So let's see what we got. Next slide. So this is a series imagery depiction of those 4 blocks. This is at July 20th. We're roughly about, I'm going to say about 6 to 7 weeks before harvest. This is a good look at what the trees looked like with a fairly mature fruit set about halfway through their development. You can see the left top is our check here. The numbering goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is our control here. Basically, the false coloring here correlates to relative photosynthetic activity as a function of area. This is taken by a plane that flies overhead. Red equals less photosynthesis. Green, like down here, equals a lot more photosynthetic activity. And that can happen through either more photosynthetic activity happening per unit area, or just more leaves, more just raw solar capture happening in a given area. So some pretty, you know, I think you can definitely tell that the check here is the most red, but it really took a little bit more analysis to tease out some of these responses. So let's go to the next slide. And this is where some of the leaf mineral nutrient analysis was quite helpful. So you see down here, this is block 4. This is our check. And so we're looking for higher amounts of leaf mineral nitrogen than the check. And here's our baseline in June. This is 1 week after the very first application. Sadly, we weren't able to get a true baseline, which would have taken these numbers before that first application. But you can already tell that we're starting to get some improved responses from 2 of the 3 blocks that are seeing the NanoN plus treatment. So let's go on to the next one. So this is in August. And again, if you compare the 2.08 to 2.43, 2.3, and then oddly, a 2.08 as well, but the average of these 3 when compared to the check is obviously a lot higher. So at this point, we were able to get pretty close to harvest, and we were able to say that equal or higher leaf nitrogen content was observed despite the reduced rate with NanoN inclusion. And at this point, the trees have seen 3 of their 4 scheduled nitrogen injections. So pretty encouraging. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so just a quick overview with those specialty crop and larger row crop studies in mind. This is a really great, easy product to use. Right time, right place, right? Given some of the market dynamics that have happened over, you know, the 21 to 22 transition, access to UAN is challenging, both from a financial and also just from a pragmatic standpoint. So embracing technologies that can help you get more of that nitrogen that you bought in your tote into the actual plant tissue itself, it's just going to do nothing but help you. Again, we're looking at a dark brown, very stable, highly compatible concentrate here. Its use and convenience is because of its low use rate at 4 ounces to the acre. And let's go to the next slide. So it has direct benefits, and also I'd argue some indirect benefits of integration into your nitrogen fertility program. We've documented here, you're just getting faster nitrogen absorption. And because more of your nitrogen that you're applying is actually being absorbed, the indirect implication of that is that you're losing less. Less is being lost to off-gassing, being lost through you know, leaching or runoff into the local water system. Another indirect implication of improved nitrogen delivery is that you could potentially reduce rates, either in total N applied per year per acre, or through individual nitrogen application rates on a one-time basis. We've already gotten some great field reports of synergistic or at least compatible responses of NanoN Plus with existing commercial nitrogen stabilizers. We do think that this is probably an area of the market that's going to be growing in use more, particularly with this year. And we also wanted to note that we will be expanding some of the characterization of NanoN Plus's direct interaction with UAN stabilization as it is now. We're not marketing it or framing it or positioning it as a nitrogen stabilizer now. But there is some evidence to suggest that the unique chemistry in NanoN Plus is able to interact with UAN in a beneficial way to some extent. And we're in the process now of characterizing and quantifying what that is. Some other improved nutrient absorption in response to NanoN+. We've definitely seen that, and this agrees with some just existing knowledge of how nutrient uptake occurs. Generally, with improved nitrogen uptake, you're going to see improved phosphorus uptake as well. That does vary quite a bit by crop type and soil, but a broad look at some of our internal data trends do suggest that. We see excellent micronutrient uptake with NanoN+ when combined in foliar application. And we also see a great reduction in heavy metal uptake through NanoN+ integration as well. So these are some of the aspects that we think can really offer some direct and indirect benefits to your nitrogen fertility program with NanoN+. Let's go to the next one. So some future directions for us, because we here at AquaYield, we sort of adopt the Lexus mindset, the constant pursuit of perfection. There's definitely some further directions to take, and we definitely want to further demonstrate quantifiable nitrate reduction capabilities. If there is an interaction with ammonia and nitrate forms in solution with NanoN+ in terms of stabilization, we really want to do a great job of assessing and characterizing what that is, and then framing what the impacts of that stabilization might look like for a production system over time. We're definitely pursuing trials for environmentally sensitive cropping areas. You know, like I mentioned, regulatory pressures are growing and increasing, especially with water quality, water access. And so we want to embrace growers that are challenged with situations like that and really see if NanoN+ can be that solution that they need for continued sustainability. We'd like to continue gathering data on NanoN+ performance, particularly with both specialty crops, tree nut crops, fruits included, small berries, but also row crops as well, corn, soy. And then finally, tomatoes and foliage greens are definitely going to be on our radar, just given the nature of nitrogen use in crops. I think getting our hands on some lettuce greens, spinach, brassicaceae, or cruciferous data production would be fantastic. And then finally, quantify NanoN+ impact on nitrogen stability. So this is what we were talking about earlier. And I believe that is it. Next slide, Mark. That's it. Okay, guys, any questions for us, please? Jeff, just go for it. Oh, I think you're muted, buddy. You can try typing in the chat as well, whatever's easiest. I don't think I'm allowed to unmute.
Yeah. Thank you for all this information again. It's exciting to watch and exciting to see with what's happening, and we know by these results with what is going to be taking place over the next several years. We're just excited about this.
Thank you. We are too. Some truly amazing technology, and I think we've just scratched the surface of its use so far.
I agree.
Any other questions?
Chris, I'm not sure if I got unmuted. This is Rich in Michigan.
Hey, Rich, how's it going?
Oh, good. Well, thank the Lord. I got something to work here. Hey, couple of questions. Being a newbie, really new. Did a grower meeting the other day, shared it with Mike Jackson and Steve from Purple Cow, and a question came up: can the two sources of NanoN be applied at the same time? Was one of the questions. I'll answer that one, or ask that one first.
So just to repeat your question, were you asking that if two sources of NanoN can be?
Yep. Nope. It would be two sources of the nanotechnology, and the reference point that was asked in this meeting was using NanoN in conjunction with Nano-K, 2x2 delivery for corn.
Yeah. That I can't see any problems with that. They should pair up quite nicely.
Would you? And then the follow-up to that would be if they're going to side dress some additional N. Would you look at where you're going to have two placements, two different times? Any direction or opinion on the rate?
I just, in terms of the rate or the nitrogen source, I just mentioned that if you're going to be side dressing, you can go a little bit harder on the salt index and maybe consider something like a calcium nitrate or potassium nitrate at that point to hit them a little bit harder with the nitrogen, and then also some other stuff that they're going to be needing in high volumes at that point too.
Okay, this question's for myself. Is on the NanoN, which I heard this, I was tied up with a customer and didn't get on when you first started. I apologize, but I heard most of it, I believe. And the question that came to mind is in a big part of the area, if they're using 2x2 and we were to position NanoN with nitrogen on the planer 2x2 or a similar delivery, what about with sulfur?
Joe, I saw that you were on the call. Would you care to speak to that one?
He's probably trying to call me and tell me to knock it off.
Joe,
I can add into that. So you're basically asking with a straight sulfur or with like AMS in with the UAN?
Well, it'd be like with ammonium thiosulfate, because the thought process, Jim, would be, okay, for years they could only put so much in that delivery because of rate and delivery of the planter. And my thought process is if we stayed with the same, the nanotechnology is potentially going to get more sulfur in here, thus would change your whole fertility program potentially.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can think the same lines because sulfur and nitrogen act the same in the soil, right? So if you're going to have NanoN in there, it's going to protect and hang on to that sulfur just like it does with the nitrogen, and you'll definitely get more utilization. Yeah.
And that's to be tried and tested, obviously, is how much can we alter sulfur and other delivery options with the nanotechnology, and therefore when we have multiple deliveries, this, to me, this is gigantic, everybody that's on this call, because not just because of current costs, it's the 4 hours, it's how much you can get at each placement to be taken up by the plant that correlates to yield. So I thank you. And every Friday, I'm probably just going to have more, so I'm just going to warn you ahead of time.
Good.
No worries.
Yeah.
I'm here. I apologize.
Thanks, everybody.
I was working on the unmute button. Couldn't find it.
No worries, Joe. What are your thoughts on, maybe not in furrow sulfur, but at that sort of V2 stage? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's critical. The addition of NanoN is going to help everything move through. Obviously, we know sulfur is a huge component of getting the amino acid build during that V2 stage, because that's like a major vegetation stage. We're getting ready for that nitrogen flux. As that plant's getting taller, the additional sulfur is going to help them proteins coil and bind them together like a perm in your hair. So with the addition of NanoN is going to help utilize the nitrogen better, the uptake better. And it's going to be a little more efficient in a way. If you think about it, that plant has to take all of these nutrients in and position them and stage them and how it's going to need it. But when we add NanoN into that, it can utilize its energy elsewhere in making the sulfur do its work that it needs to do. So this is where I see it going to be huge in that side dress time period.
Yeah, exactly. Rich, anything else?
Well,
now.
For now, we're good for today. This is a very good start. I appreciate this because Joe and Jim, the other guy, they know I'm big into layering at every delivery option. Every time we go to the field, how do we make a difference? And that's what's so exciting about the nanotechnology. It really just opens up your total mindset of what we do, and we just got to go out there and do as much as we can and collect as many data points as we can.
Hallelujah.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So any other questions before we come back in a few more days for the second of our exciting series? Next one's on NanoK.
One last question. Is this presentation going to be sent out with the slides and or not?
Yeah, we're going to make both the slide deck and this recording available to all participants, and I believe any of the distributors that are interested.
Okay, once we get through the series of these, the February session, and do we work with Jenny to take, or Joe, or who? So I'm just looking for direction to kind of tailor make PowerPoints of high points of each one of these that we can put on our Microsoft thing to, take right out to the field, be it whatever crop, potatoes, sugar beets, or whatever one we're doing. Will we be able to do that?
Yeah, Joe or Rich, we'll get back with you on that, but definitely we'll help you build your slide decks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I think that's it for our inaugural event.
Yeah, great job, Chris. Great questions, everybody, too. Thanks for your time. Hope you all have a great weekend and stay warm. And we'll look forward to talking again on Friday.
Thank you.
Take it easy, everyone.
Sounds great, everybody. Thank you.